This video is sponsored by Electronic Arts. Now Fingolfin, King of the North and High King of the Noldor, seeing that his people were become numerous and strong, and that the men allied to them were many and valiant, pondered once more an assault upon Angband, for he knew that they lived in danger, while the circle of the siege was incomplete, and Morgoth was free to labor in his deep mines, devising what evils none could foretell, ere he should reveal them. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today I wanted to continue our conversations on the families of Middle-earth, and speak not of the whole line of Finwë, as that would actually be quite a long video, but rather narrowing our focus to the High Kings of the Noldor Elves, Finwë's heirs. Some helpful and related articles and videos are in the description and cards. Before we get started, I would like to thank the sponsor for today's video. The Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle-earth is a new CRPG from Capital Games and EA that lets you collect your favorite characters, both good and evil, and explore Middle-earth. Relive your favorite stories along with brand new ones based on Tolkien's works. Elrond has lived in Middle-earth for many millennia, where he was a part of the last alliance of elves and men, and helped found the Fellowship during the Council of Elrond. His healing skills are legendary, and he is also a wielder of one of the 3 elven rings. Elrond is coming soon to Heroes of Middle-earth. Be sure to collect 5 elven characters before his legendary adventure event starts June 26th. Legendary adventures are limited-time events that give players an opportunity to upgrade their characters and unlock powerful legendary characters. Legendary adventures may return in the future, but are only available for a short time, so make sure to be prepared with 5 elven characters. Even if you miss Elrond's legendary adventure event, there are still tons of exciting Lord of the Rings characters to collect and stories to explore. Download the Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle-earth for free using the link in the description or by scanning the QR code with your phone. Please check this game out, and thank you to Capital Games and EA once again for sponsoring this video. Now, on to our story. We start this list with the patron of this family, the first king of the Noldor, Finwë. While in some lore it is noted that he was descended from elves named Tata and Tatie, and may not have been one of the first of the elves to awaken, he was still one of the 3 elven ambassadors that the Vala Orome escorted from the east in Middle-earth to Valinor. Finwë, Ingwë, and Elwë would become the first 3 kings of their people respectively, as Finwë became the king of the Noldor and, upon returning from his wondrous journey in Valinor, led his people back there. Now, it's important to note the difference between a king and a high king. A king rules a people and a realm, while a high king only exists when there are multiple realms, and sometimes multiple kings under his rule. Thus Finwë nor his son Fëanor were technically high kings, yet we roughly consider them to be such, or at least Finwë, since he founded his line and led all of the people that would eventually split apart into multiple kingdoms. In the Silmarillion, you don't really find him to be called High King nor Fëanor, but again, this became much more of a hereditary title. While I will not fully cover Finwë's history here, he ultimately ruled his people mostly in peace in Valinor. His wife Míriel would pass away after Fëanor's birth, leading to much sorrow, but Finwë loved his son greatly, perhaps more than anyone else, and he would eventually remarry to an elf named Indis, with whom Finwë had 2 daughters, Findis and Irime, and Fingolfin and Finarfin his sons. Fëanor and his half-brother Fingolfin would be poised against each other based on the lies of Melkor, who sought to sow ruinous seeds in the Noldor, the Deep Elves, the craftsmen, for Melkor was jealous of them, and coveted Fëanor's Silmarils once the elf had made them. Finwë struggled to end this feud between his sons, even leaving the city of Tirion to the rule of Fingolfin when Fëanor was banished to a different part of Valinor by the Valar for threatening his own brother. Finwë went with his eldest son Fëanor and would live with him and his grandchildren in Fëanor's home of Formenos, abandoning his own duties as the king of the Noldor. There came a time when the Valar summoned the Noldor to a festival, and while Fëanor would go himself, Finwë would not, remaining bitter and loyal to his eldest son. Now this was Finwë's grave and sorrowful final mistake, as Melkor would go on to destroy the 2 trees with Ungoliant, and thereafter he went to Formenos, murdering King Finwë and stealing the Silmarils, beginning a feud between elves and former Vala, that would see almost all the rest of the High Kings of the Noldor slain, their realms destroyed. While it was certainly not Finwë's fault that he was killed himself, had he remained more dutiful as king, much disaster and strife might have been averted. Kingship for the elves is a really interesting topic because elves are meant to be immortal. In most cases, with humans and men, they have heirs knowing that they will eventually pass away, but elves are meant to rule forever because they're meant to live forever. In this case, and many cases that we're going to look at today, they were lucky to have heirs if they did. After Finwë, Fëanor, as his eldest son, claimed the mantle of kingship of the Noldor, and led his people into exile, back towards Middle-earth away from the Valar, both to reclaim his Silmarils, as he stated in his oath that his sons also took, but nearly equally to avenge his father, the first king. It would be during Fëanor's travels with his people that he committed an atrocity, the first kinslaying against the Teleri Elves, stealing their ships in his wrath to go east, and Finarfin, Fëanor's youngest half-brother, repented and went back to Tirion, becoming not a High King, but the next King of the Noldor and the final King of the Noldor in Valinor. Thus a schism began that saw the Noldor split into multiple factions, a divide that would be deepened when Fëanor took his most loyal followers and sons, and abandoned his other brother, Fingolfin, and his host, leaving them by taking the ships of the Teleri to Middle-earth, and then burning them rather than sending them back. From this kinslaying and this action, many of Fingolfin's people hardly acknowledged Fëanor as their king anymore, but officially, he still was. They would follow Fingolfin over the Helcaraxe into Middle-earth, taking a much harder road than the ships would have been. Now Fëanor was only king until the Battle Under Stars, when, after landing in Middle-earth, the king pushed too far and too passionately without proper reinforcements, and would be given wounds from Balrogs, leading to his ultimate death. In his final moments, seeing the Thangorodrim volcanoes towering above Angband, Morgoth's fortress, he knew that the elves would never triumph against Melkor or Morgoth unaided. Then King Fëanor died, and his eldest son Maethros would have a claim to the kingship of the Noldor. Maethros would never claim it, however, as he was soon after captured by Morgoth's forces and chained to those same volcanic mountains. He would remain there until his friend and cousin Fingon saved him with the help of the eagle Thorondor. After seeing the strife his father had caused, and wishing for there to be a peace and reunion among the Noldor again, and as a courtesy to Fingon's family, Maethros would give up his claim and the claim of his brothers, the claim of Fëanor's house, to the kingship of the Noldor, abdicating his crown in favor of a more valiant leader, Fingolfin, his uncle, who would become the first High King of the Noldor in Middle-earth. With this, Fingolfin would eventually call for a feast of reuniting, bringing the Noldor back together, though there was still some ill will between some of these elves. Fingolfin would lead his people in the glorious battle, pushing the forces of Morgoth back into Angband under a siege that lasted years. Now, Fingolfin would be High King, as other Noldor would create their own realms and become kings as well, such as his own son Turgon, who built Gondolin and was its king, or Finrod, Fingolfin's nephew, who built Nargothrond and was its king. Fingolfin ruled from Hithlum, though these other realms were directly ruled by their own kings, but they still fell under his high rule, thus making him a High King, truly the first High King of the Noldor of Middle-earth. He would be gracious to men when they crossed into Beleriand, allying with them and giving them land to live upon. Fingolfin's siege on Angband would eventually be broken, however, during the Battle of Sudden Flame, and when much seemed lost, Fingolfin himself rode forth to challenge Morgoth to a duel, and he personally wounded the Dark Lord for being slain himself. With Fingolfin's death, Fingon, who in the past was more friendly with the House of Fëanor than others, even aiding unknowingly in the evil of the kinslaying, became the next High King of the Noldor, ruling from his fortress of Ithilcirion. He would have great allies in the fight against the Dark Lord, including the men of the House of Hador, his cousin and friend Maethros, who was the Lord of Himring in the east, his brother Turgon of Gondolin, and his cousin Finrod of Nargothrond, among many others. He certainly had other allies as well, and many of these would follow him into battle, such as when Círdan came with his elves to help Fingon defend Hithlum. There would come a time, after the rescue of a Silmaril by Beren and Luthien, when Fingon decided to take the fight to Morgoth once more alongside his many friends. He planned to attack Angband from the southwest, while Maethros and his allies and followers would attack from the southeast. Unlooked for came King Turgon to aid Fingon as well, yet all of this was for naught. as the treachery of the Easterlings did great damage to Maethros' company, and Fingon's host could not withstand the might of Morgoth. Fingon would be bound and beaten into the dust by Balrogs, ending his life and his high kingship. Turgon would be able to escape the battle through the valor of the men of the House of Hodor, and he would be the next High King of the Noldor, hidden in his city of Gondolin. He had certainly never thought that he would be the High King of all the Noldor, yet had always been a rather good leader of elves, listening to the advice of Ulmo and leading his folk to their hidden realm. He treated the men of the House of Hodor with respect, and was told by the man Hur that from the two of them a star would come. And so Turgon ruled for a time, even as the darkness of Morgoth encroached from abroad. Eventually, Hur's son Tur found Turgon's old city in the west, at Nevrast, and spoke to Ulmo, who sent him with a guide to Gondolin to warn Turgon that salvation would not come from his city, that he should abandon it and go to the refuge of Sirion in the south. Yet in the end, Turgon abandoned the wisdom of Ulmo that had saved him in the past for hubris, and did not heed his advice. Tur would marry Turgon's daughter Idril, who both had a son named Eärendil, the star of the line of Hur and Turgon. Ruin through the treachery of Turgon's nephew Maeglin would come to Gondolin, and Morgoth destroyed the city. Turgon's own tower fell upon him, and he died. And so the High Kingship would go to the next male heir of Finwë left in Middle-earth, not of the line of Fëanor. In the Silmarillion, this was Fingon's son, Gil-galad. Yet, this is actually said to be a mistake by Christopher Tolkien, as this would have put Gil-galad's claim actually ahead of Turgon, who we know was the High King. Thus, as other notes indicate, Gil-galad was instead the son of Orodreth, and the great-grandson of Finarfin, and Gil-galad was the last living male heir through primogeniture of the House of Finwë, who was not of the House of Fëanor. And so Gil-galad, who had stayed at or near sea with Círdan for much of his early life, was made the High King, and he survived the First Age and Morgoth's defeat. After the destruction of Beleriand, he would rule his new elven kingdom from Mithlond in Lindon, in Eriador. He was still High King, though there were not really other kings of the Noldor anymore, and so the title became more hereditary than anything. He would make connections and alliances with many Númenóreans throughout the Second Age, allow for realms and peoples to be ruled by lords and ladies on his behalf, like Celeborn, Galadriel, Celebrimbor, and eventually Elrond. He would defy the lies and shadow of Sauron in both the War of the Elves and Sauron, and in the War of the Last Alliance. After the downfall of Númenor and the coming of Elendil and his sons to Middle-earth, he allied himself well with them, taking an oath of friendship and alliance with Elendil, and dying with him, while also defeating Sauron in Mordor during the War of the Last Alliance. Sauron burned him with his hand, and Gil-galad, as well as the High Kings of the Noldor, were no more. He would be the last of them, never having any children nor naming any heir, yet the world and elves had changed a great amount since the time of Finwë before the sun and moon. For more information on the end of the High Kingship, please check out my video on why Gil-galad was the last High King of the Noldor. And so, with the diminishment and doom of the Noldor full wrought, and the majesty of the High Elves thoroughly explored, we come to the end of our tale on the High Kings of the Noldor Elves. From this story, we see that we must endeavor to teach those who come after us the lessons, virtues, and failures of ourselves and those who came before, that those who come after us live better than we did. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this Families of Middle-earth video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts on this lineage? Let me know in the comments below. I really appreciate how each High King brings lessons of their own and elements of their own into the story. Thanks again to EA for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out Heroes of Middle-earth through the link in the description. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members: Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Blair Scout and Merton, John Hume, Sam McBee, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Reese Jenkins, Adam Petrlik, Anthony Harmon, Arthur Merlin, Dale Davis, Kingswald Project, and King of Games 2500. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the free peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with a video on Gandalf's original plan in The Lord of the Rings. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.